Welcome back to our study in the book of Second Corinthians. Now, as we begin to look at chapter 10 of Second Corinthians, we need to understand that the Apostle Paul is beginning to describe himself. You see, the Apostle Paul has been under tremendous attack in Corinth. And the Apostle Paul has found many people that are saying bad things about the Apostle Paul. Some of them are Judaizers. Some of them are just false teachers that are jealous of the Apostle Paul's ministry. Some of them are people that serve other gods and that are very immoral, but they are attacking the Apostle Paul. And the Apostle Paul now comes and he says, you know what? This is who I am. And so the Apostle Paul starts out, verse number 1 of chapter 10, now I, Paul, myself. In other words, Paul's saying, I'm talking about me right now. I'm talking about who I am. You see, there were people there that were saying, Paul, he just uses his authority to destroy you. He uses his authority to put you down. He uses his authority to take away your freedoms. And so Paul has to defend himself. So he says, and he starts again, chapter 10, with now I, Paul, myself. And then he goes on, he says, I urge you by the meekness and the gentleness of Christ. You see, one of the things that the Apostle Paul has been accused of is not being meek and not being gentle with the Corinthians. How many of you know that we have to have an understanding of what meekness is? Meekness is not weakness. Meekness is not some limp-wristed approach to people. Meekness is caring. Meekness is it means that a humbleness. How many of you know that you can operate from a place of humility, but still operate from a place of great strength? In fact, there is great strength in humility itself. And so Paul, he says, I myself urge you by meekness. In other words, Paul's saying, I'm coming to you with meekness. I'm coming to you with humility. I'm coming to you with meekness so that I can instruct you, so that I can help you, so that I can show you what to do, tell you what to do. So he says with meekness. Now, meekness is a grace in the spirit of a believer given to them by Christ. Notice what Paul says. He says the meekness, and then to fast forward just a couple words, of Christ. How many of you know Christ was meek even when he threw the money changers out of the temple and made a whip? He was meek when he looked at the Pharisees, at the Sadducees, how he called them whitewashed sepulchres. How many of you know that was in a spirit of meekness, a spirit of humility? Why did he do that? Why did Jesus do that? He did that to correct them. He did that to get them back on the right path. And so Paul says, I come to you in a spirit of meekness. And then he says, and of gentleness. The word gentleness means something that's fitting. It doesn't mean something that's smooth and nice. It means something that's appropriate. How many of you know sometimes it's appropriate to bring a warning? Sometimes it's appropriate to bring discipline. If you've got children, you need to realize that that gentleness actually means to come and do something appropriate for them, to do something to help them, to do something to guide them on their way, to bring discipline. And that's exactly what the Apostle Paul has been doing with the Corinthians. He's been bringing meekness. He's been bringing a message in meekness. He's been bringing a message in gentleness. But that does not mean that he was weak. It means that he was bringing something to them to correct them. The book of 1 Corinthians is a hard book. We could say, oh, that was hard. His instruction was hard. Turn him over to Satan for the destruction of it. Oh, that's terrible, Paul. That's not meekness. Yeah. You know what? It worked. The man came back to his relationship with Jesus. You understand? And we've got a very big misconception of what meekness and what gentleness is. And then Paul continues in verse 1, I who am meek when face to face with you, but bold towards you when absent. What's Paul doing? He's describing himself. He's saying, I'm meek face to face with you. The word means that he's of a low attitude or low social position. How many of you realize that in Corinth, social position was a major factor in the lives of the Corinthians? And Paul said, you know what? I made myself. He said, I made myself meek. I made myself of low social position with you when face to face, when I'm with you face to face, when I'm with you physically. And then he says, but bold towards you when I'm absent. How many of you know Paul wrote the 1 Corinthians as a letter and sent it to the city of Corinth? But he was bold in what he said. You see, boldness does not negate meekness and weakness. Boldness is an attribute that follows a person who is meek and gentle. Now let's move on to verse number 2. I ask that when I am present, I need not to be bold with the confidence with which I propose to be courageous against some. What's Paul saying? He's saying when I'm present, I don't want to be bold. I don't want to show this confidence. He says, I ask that when I am present, I need not be bold with confidence. What's he saying? He's saying, when I'm there present, when I'm coming to you, but when I'm there present, I don't want to have this boldness with confidence. And he says, which I propose to be courageous against some. He stood against some. The Apostle Paul stood against false teachers. He stood against Judaizers that were trying to destroy the church. He stood against people that were practicing the worship of idols. He stood against them. Why? Because it takes a man who is courageous, who is bold, who is meek, and who is gentle to stand against some. And we're going to talk about those sums later on. And then he ends verse number 3 by saying this, who regard us as if we walk according to the flesh. In other words, he said, these people think that we just walk according to the flesh, that all we are is just flesh. Thank you for watching our podcast today. Join us again tomorrow as we continue our study in the book of 2 Corinthians.